Hello. Plumbers in the Pub 02, episode 2. In today's Plumber in the Pub, I'm going to be talking to a real boffin, an HR boffin. Okay, chap's called Andrew Beaumont, and I'm going to be asking the big questions that are frequently asked when expanding and hiring people, such as how easy is it to dismiss the bad eggs? We've all been there. Okay, what about annual leave after lockdown? But some essential knowledge that's all new through talking to Andrew last week in the pub was finding out about this £10 million, about subcontractors and this little piece of legislation called IR35 and how it mostly does not affect us, the small business owner. It's a piece of legislation that was actually passed just as the pandemic started last year in April 2020. So it was quite easily flying underneath the radar with everything that was happening. It's called the Good Work Plan. And basically, it's going to be a big change that voids any employment contract prior to April 2020 last year. So if you have staff or you're looking on taking on staff and you're still looking at a contract that you've got for free or on the cheap from somewhere, or it's a contract that existed before April 2020, you might want to stick around and watch this video.
So you think your boiler's had it? I'll fetch the 2 bags from the van. If you want the best, don't ask questions, 'cause brother, I'm your man. What it'll cost, well that's a mystery. Until I take off the cover, who knows what I'm gonna see. These are the jobs driving me berserk. Why do only fools and plumbers work? La 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 la, 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 la 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 la. La 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 la, yeah. Why do only fools and plumbers work?
So, those that are in the boiler business community, you may have remembered that I did a post basically saying, hey, I'm going to be chatting to an HR person. Put your questions in this post. That is what we're going to be talking about. So this is the video from Plumbers in the Pub last week. Nice one. Okay, Andrew, you welcome to Plumbers in the Pub. You have 60 seconds to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thanks, Tommy. So to try and keep it interesting when it's not,
I give you absolutely no warning that was going to happen, did I?
No. So I'm a HR consultant, so I deal with everything people related, from contracts of employment to terminations and everything in between. So. Mm-hmm.
Can we call you a people geek? You're going to help. You can help small businesses run people a little bit better by knowing and understanding the law.
Yeah, absolutely. But also give business owners and you know the people in your forum a lot of time back. You know that they're currently spending dealing with things that they don't need to.
Mm. And there's a lot of misunderstanding, particularly because a lot of people in our industry are running their own business. Yeah. And when you go to the ACS centre or go to the college or wherever you got your qualification, they don't teach you zip about running a business. And then before you know it...
No, they don't.
Tradespeople become busy and then they go and get staff. And then that's when the problems can come up. Andrew, it is the day that we're recording this. It's a rather warm day, and I have been working hard helping to build a new office. So if you don't mind, as it is Plumbers in the Pub, I'm going to crack open this beer. Okay.
Okay.
And I have to say, it's 25 to 5 at the moment, so it's perfectly acceptable.
Absolutely. Given that the football's been kicking off at 5 o'clock as well. Some of it.
Right, my friend. Let's jump over, because I asked the members group, the Boiler Business members group. I asked them what questions, if you was in a pub.
Yep.
We have a HR boffin lined up to answer your staff questions. Post your staff questions below. I did read some of them. There were some interesting ones. I have to say I've been a bit busy working on that office in the last few days. So I trust that you've looked through these questions.
Yeah.
And is there any that you don't want to answer yet? Just give me a nod. No?
No, I'm comfortable with them all.
Super.
To be fair.
Super duper. Okay, well let's dive in, and I'm just going to be absolutely random in looking at the questions. I understand that we've only got about 25 minutes for schedule purposes. I'm going to be pretty random about which questions we look at, so I'm not showing any favoritism. First one, I am going to go to Richard Lloyd, because I asked the question, and Richard was the first one that popped up and got the ball rolling. So let's look at Richard Lloyd's question here. Is there anywhere best to get an employee contract from, or does anyone have one I can look at? My employee has just passed their gas, and so I am about to look at getting him his own van, but want to update his contract now. So over to you, Andrew.
Okay, so when COVID hit last year, COVID took over the news. There was also a bit of law put in place as well, which is it's called the Good Work Plan, and it's incredibly hard, Tommy, to try and keep this lighthearted, because it is, even I find it boring, but effectively it just changed the law around what needed to govern a contract of employment. But what that actually means is, if you've got a contract of employment that you've downloaded or was given to you and you made by the pub, and it predates April 2020, it will now be out of date.
Wow.
My sensible suggestion would be, because it is a legal document, my sensible suggestion would be to seek professional advice. Talk to a HR consultant, talk to me. I'm not a solicitor. The fees aren't anywhere near the solicitor type of level, but it will give you the protection. Now, the strange thing with contracts of employment is, whilst there is a legal requirement to have one in place on day one, actually, if you don't have one in place, it's very unlikely to bite you. You're very unlikely to get into trouble for not having one. You're not going to get sued if you don't have a contract of employment in place. It just helps as an engagement tool. The staff members know what they're expected to do. You know what you're expected of your staff members, and it puts everything in place from day one. But actually, anybody who turns around and says you'll get sued if you don't have a contract of employment is lying.
Right. But if we were to have a very, very quick short answer, something that I picked out there, what you mentioned, as of April 2020, the contract doesn't meet where we should be. So everybody that's given a contract prior to 2020 really just needs to go back and do they have to redo it or just recreate a new contract?
Yeah, it's not retrospective, Tommy. So anybody who was hired pre-April 2020 is fine on whatever they'd got. Anybody that's been hired post-April 2020 on a contract that predated it probably needs a contract looking at.
Right. Okay, so we're no doubt we're going to get to where they can get in contact with you if they want to get in contact with you at a later point. We'll be able to share your details on this feed later after we've gone through some questions, and also wherever we put this video, we'll have your contact details in there as well. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. And by the way, I've got a sound effect. I wonder if you can hear this sound effect. I'll hear it in my ears.
Yes, I can hear that.
Yes, ding dong.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Of course, we do want to answer as many questions as possible. So if I ding dong it, I'm not being disrespectful.
Yeah.
We're just in the pub and we've got a lot to get through.
I like David's question, Tommy, that I can just see on the bottom of the screen because it's talking about dismissal.
Sure. David Armstrong. Okay, so here's a few off the top of my head. A few. Yeah, he's asked a few, hasn't he? Here's a few off the top of my head. Don't have to use all of them. How easy is it to dismiss someone outside of their probation period? Is that the question that you want to answer?
Yeah. So it's very probation period is a complete red herring. It carries no weight in law whatsoever. Effectively, if you have a member of staff within the first 2 years of their employment, you can dismiss them very easily without following a process and just pay them the notice. The only things to be careful of is if they've got a protected characteristic, so race, religion, disability, all of that kind of stuff. Probation period is a red herring. You can typically get rid of somebody in the first 2 years very quickly.
So let me dive in on that. So for the members of staff that have their feet under the table, and have been there for a while, and then for whatever reason decide to not pull their weight as much, or have other problems going on, whatever the reason, once they've been there over 2 years, why does it become difficult, and what can we do about it if this small business owner, because most people in our industry are small business owners with only a few members of staff normally. Okay, there's not many businesses out there that actually have 10, 20 members of staff on board. So, we're talking a small team, and if in a small team one person's not pulling their weight, it doesn't matter how long they've been at the business, it's really going to affect that business. So how can people address this if the staff member's been there for over 2 years?
So effectively, the only thing with 2 years, Tommy, is over 2 years, an individual is allowed to claim unfair dismissal. That's the reason why 2 years is relevant. So over 2 years, what all you would do is you would take the individual through disciplinary as a process. You'd have a disciplinary procedure in place, and you'd just follow that. So it's still a process. It's still become a safe dismissal. It's just slightly more complex.
Mm-hmm. So as long as you have procedures within your business, and said member of staff has a copy of procedures and has signed a copy of procedures to say, this is our disciplinary action, we're going to do X first, we're going to do Y second, and if you don't follow, sort yourself out, it's going to come to X.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Let's move on because we've got a lot of people. We've got Rob Moore sending some eyes at somebody. Okay, I like Rob. Mike Salmon is normally asking lots of questions, but I've not seen anything from him. Let's go to.
I don't talk about IR35 because there's 3 or 4 people raising the same thing about the difference between. You're one of them, between staff and subcontractors. Yeah,
it's a big one. It's a big one because I hear from speaking to lots of business owners. I hear a lot of talk about using subbies, but they're using subbies practically full time.
Yeah.
So tell me what the difference is and what's really bad and what's not so bad.
So you've asked the question. Rob's also asked the question about IR35. IR35 is HMRC regulations, but effectively, the big thing about it is, just to allay all of the fears, is IR35 only comes in if the organisation has a turnover of above 10 million in a year. 5 million on the balance sheet, or above 50 employees, if 2 out of the 3 of those apply, that's the only time the company actually can fall foul of IR35. So if you've got less than 50 employees and less than 10 million in turnover, you will never, ever fall foul of IR35 because you're a small company under HMRC regulations.
Forgive me if I'm not listening to that clearly. That sounded to me that a small business owner can use a subcontractor 40 hours, 50 hours a week and pay them as subcontractor.
Yes.
Now I, in my imagination, in my understanding, I always believed that the subcontractor has to be bona fide, self-employed, and be allowed and actively working for other people, i.e., doing other work for other customers, and you are just a customer of this business. That was my understanding of subcontractors. Now, I believe that you could offer someone a contract for 6 months, for instance, come and do this contract for 6 months, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, and it's a contract. But at the end of that 6 month contract, the subcontractor would be fully allowed to go and take a contract elsewhere. So that's how you would get around the 40 hours, 50 hours, if we want to use the word get around. But it's in my imagination, they've still got to be able to go and work on a Friday somewhere else, or say no to this job opportunity that you've offered them because they are self-employed. But what it sounds to me that you've just said, well, no, it don't really matter unless you're turning over £50 million.
So everything you've just said about substitution and all of that would make the distinction about whether they're self-employed or not. But where the threshold comes in is it's the subcontractor that's taking the liability. So they're the ones that are responsible for whether they're self-employed or not self-employed. And the way I would have this working is I would have a contractors agreement between you and the subcontractor that basically says lots of other terms and conditions, but it basically says the subcontractor is responsible for their own tax matters. End of. And then HMRC think you should be working for more than one company. That's irrelevant to you, Tommy, and to your members, because actually it's a subcontractor that's taking responsibility.
Got you. But clearly, if anybody has further questions regarding this or feels as though they're getting into sticky water, they can always reach out to you and get a proper conversation. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's move on. Let's move on because I know that we have time with us. Big question here from Lynette. And Lynette, I've never spoken to you, so forgive me if I pronounce this incorrect, but I'm going to go with Carver-Batter. I'm going to replace the W with a V. Let me know if I got that right. Carver-Batter. Definitely Lynette. I can read that. So Lynette says annual leave. Where can I read? I can read it in front of me actually. Annual leave entitlement not being used. Do we have to carry over or pay if not used? I haven't refused holidays. They are just haven't been used because of lockdown. Okay. Calculating overtime. Are you following this? I'm sorry if I'm not reading it out.
No, I've read it.
Fluent here. So what's the answer to Lynette's question?
Effectively, most of what Lynette has said, and it may be, I'm happy to take offline with her if she wants to, everything that's pretty much every question that she's answered there, asked there, will be dependent on what's in her employment contract. Because one, paying time and a half, there is no legal requirement on that in terms of what you're supposed to do. What you actually do is put in the contract of employment what rate you're going to pay your overtime at. And then it becomes contractual. So it depends what she's got in a contract of employment. Same with holiday rollover. In terms of the bit around car policy, again, that would depend on what's in the documentation. Fundamentally, Tommy, most stuff with employees, employers, it depends what's actually written down.
Yeah. Just on that, how often can businesses change the contract? So they take on a new member of staff. Often they're not fully established businesses with 20 years, 30 years history behind them. So everybody's on a learning curve, and they get a contract. They probably borrowed it from somewhere. Okay, it probably didn't cost much money. They probably didn't have much guidance on what to put into the contract, and they just basically done the basic so that they've got a contract. But then a year down the line, 2 years down the line, 3 years, 4 years, whatever, the business has developed, the business has grown, potentially the team has grown, but often these businesses are still relying on the contract that they got for nothing, however many years ago. How easy is it for you to bring a member of staff in? I'd often look at appraisal time and then say, well, let's sign a new contract. How easy is it? How enforceable is it? What's right? What's wrong? Because you've already given them a contract, however many months or years before, but now to the employee, the business owner is moving the goalposts. So what can we do? Because we know that we're forever learning in our business. We know that we're forever learning about the team members that we have, and often the business owner does want to move the goalposts.
Somebody's actually asked that question, Tommy, on one of the questions in the group.
Right.
Typically, employment contract would say, we need to give you notice of various of these terms, and it's usually a month's notice to vary the terms in the contract. If the individual is happy to sign the new contract, then you don't have an issue. If they're not, then effectively you would consult with them for a month about this is what we want to do. They would raise their concerns. Ultimately, the business can always enforce new terms. It's just easier to do it with the individual's buy-in.
Yeah.
But a month is normally the right timescale.
So ultimately, the boss is the boss.
Yeah.
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 This is how I'm running my business. You are a member of staff. If you want to be a member of staff, you got to run with my rules.
Yeah. I want to, but again, with the engagement piece, I want to change it. I want to do this. These are the reasons why. Are you in agreement? If they're in agreement, great, sign it. Yeah. If they're not, a little bit of back and forth about, well, why not? And all of that kind of stuff. But ultimately, where you would end up is if you hit an impasse and you've got nowhere to go, you would dismiss them and rehire them on the new terms. So as the business owner, that's where you would end up.
Interesting.
You wouldn't want to get there ideally.
No, absolutely. You want your team to believe in your business direction. You want your team to believe in your customer culture, the culture that you want to deliver to your customers. You want your team on board. But what I see and hear within the industry is often when business owners take on, let's say, older engineers that have worked wherever they've worked in the past, and they've done things the way that they've always done things. They're the ones that are difficult to get to adopt new policies. Sometimes technology, sometimes how we deal with customers. There's all sorts of reasons. But the business owners are forever learning, and forever learning in their business. We need to make changes, so we need the team on board. Okay, let's move on. Let's find another cracking question. I'll leave it to you to pick. So we've got Cameron Matthews there, David Armstrong. It's going to be a video, and Charles Can you pronounce this one? McGeechy. I'm going to go with McGeechy. Yes.
Right. Yeah. His is a good question, to be fair.
Right. Let's go to that then. Okay. Hi.
First-
We are looking to take on our first non-family employee. Where can I obtain an employment contract template that is short, understandable, and agreeable by both parties that doesn't look daunting? I'll leave it at that, because you've read this question, you've studied it. Where's Charles at here? He's got he's got family members on board, but now he's bringing someone new in, so it's branching out from a family business.
Yeah, you touched on this as well, Tommy. The last line he talks about what would I do in terms of bad behaviour in quotes. So, as a business owner, when you hire your first employee, there are only 3 things legally that are required: contract of employment, disciplinary policy, grievance policy, and keep them all separate. The one thing that I wouldn't do ever is use the same contract of employment for 2 plumbers, for instance, because they will want different things and potentially will want different holiday entitlements in there. So, there's a question there around holidays. Standard holidays for a full-time employee is 28 days per year. So that's legally what you've got to give them. I always, with clients, say, if you give somebody legally what the minimum amount, so 28 days, your employee is potentially going to be thinking, you're only giving me 28 days because you have to. If you're giving them 29, suddenly you're doing more than is required of you. And that extra 1 day, because there's another question higher up about employee benefits, and it's little things like that, because you're a business owner, you're looking at your budget all the time. But if you're giving somebody 29 days holiday instead of 28 days, suddenly you're doing more for them than you need to, and it's not costing you a lot.
So, for instance, at the point of offering them work, of offering them a contract, you could have a more of a personal discussion with them. What's your ideal job? That I'm not saying I'm going to give you an ideal job. I just want to know what works for you.
Yeah.
How many children do you have? When's your birthday? When's your wife's birthday? When's your kid's birthday? Well, and suddenly the employee or interviewee is like, what's this all about? Yeah. And the answer is, well, we like to treat our staff well. We're going to give some extra holiday days. Could that be an instance there?
I think what you've just said is probably the most valuable thing that I ever talk to clients about. Get to know your staff as individuals. Just because if you know the birthday's coming up, you know what they're doing at weekends. Monday morning, not everybody will like football. But you might have a member of staff who's actually going to the final on Sunday, to turn around to them on Monday morning and say, how did you like the final? What was Wembley like? Suddenly it's like, wow, I'm not just a number. My boss actually values me as an individual.
Absolutely. Just a note on that, when we had a team over by the entrance into the building, we had a cork board on there with pictures of all the members of the team. Right slap bang in the middle, it said the happiness. I'm going to say the happiness board. It's years ago, okay, and we wrote on that. The team members had to write around the pictures of them what makes them happy, so that all the team understood this is what his hobby is, this is what he likes doing, and then we can all be more appreciative when it's 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and something's hit the fan and people are not home and there's stress and there's kids to be thinking about. We can all be appreciative, and that naturally gets spoken about anyway when people are on a job. But to have it on the board on the entrance into the building, so every day we could look and see
this is what makes them tick. I thought I thought it was a big one. Yeah.
Yes.
Big one. And we tried to make concessions. We wanted, knowing that rugby practice was on a Tuesday night for this member of staff. So we try as hard as we couldn't promise it, because end of the day, work is work. And in our business, in the boiler business, when the boiler comes off the wall, nobody's going home until that family's warm again. That's our business. But if we understand, what makes the staff tick, and the reason why the staff is wanting to finish earlier on Tuesday, it smooths it out a little bit. Yeah. So do we have time for one more question? I might get a bang on the door. So I think we'll have to call it at that, because I've got to get my little boy to his swimming in 20 minutes, I think. Andrew, first of all, thank you very much for answering the few questions that we have answered. What I think, buddy, because we could have spoke all night about the questions in here. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, if you're up for this, is invite you back on in a month or two, and we'll put some more questions out there. Absolutely. And if you don't mind hanging around in the group, and then if other people pop up and ask questions, maybe you can just answer it there and then for them. But obviously your business is HR.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do professionally.
Yes,
so
indeed.
If people need extra help, that you cannot just help everyone for free, how will they get in touch with you? Other than we'll obviously drop a link around this video.
I'd have a website. I can be found on LinkedIn. Got a Facebook business page as well. There's a number of ways, easily contact.
Well, we'll drop everything around this video for people to get in touch with. But I think the main thing is if you're happy to hang out in the community, in the boiler business community, the people that have teams, that have staff, will soon see your name bouncing around, and it's always a case that people don't contact you straight away.
Yeah,
people often will only contact when they've got a problem, and it's your job to try to stop that problem from happening in the first place. So I think the moral of the story, if this was coming out of some Chinese Christmas cracker, is sort out your contract before taking on a staff and speak to an HR person. Yeah. Don't let the problem come up. Sort it out first. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Save you money and time in the long run.
Absolutely.
Nice one. Thanks, Tommy.
Nice one, Andrew. Thank you very much. This video will be going out when people see it. It's not going to be going out at the point of recording it. So thank you very much, and no doubt we'll have you on Plumbers in the Pub, official in the pub, at some point soon. Cheers, buddy.
No, pleasure. Cheers, Tommy.
Nice one.
So there we have it. That was Andrew Beaumont last week, Plumbers in the Pub. We are looking. Thank you very much for watching. Whoever's been watching, I've seen a fair few people on this live. Okay. Anybody that is watching this and wants to get involved with Plumbers in the Pub, be it an engineer, be it someone working for the manufacturers, be any part of the supply chain, or from outside our industry and wanting to help the good people in our industry, just get in touch with me. What I kind of mentioned it on the first Plumbers in the Pub, what it's all about, a bit sometimes tongue-in-cheek, having a bit of fun. It's Plumbers in the Pub, it doesn't all have to be serious stuff, but what do Plumbers in the Pub talk about? anything goes. Anything goes. So that's me, Tommy Lee Jmuda, from the boiler business community. I'm going to shut this down now and go for a long swim, because I do like swimming in summertime. We'll be back next week. Who will it be next week? Toodle pip.
So you think your boiler's had it? I'll fetch the 2 bags from the van. If you want the best, don't ask questions, 'cause brother, I'm your man. What it'll cost, well that's a mystery. Until I take off the cover, who knows what I'm gonna see. These are the jobs driving me berserk. Why do only fools and plumbers work? La 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 la, 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 yeah. Why do only fools and plumbers